The morning fog hung thick over the Cotswolds estate as Camilla stepped into her garden, teacup trembling slightly in her hands. She had barely slept since the funeral 3 weeks ago. The Queen's passing had left a hole in the royal family that seemed impossible to fill, and the weight of grief pressed down on everyone's shoulders like a heavy blanket. Camilla walked slowly through the rose garden that she and Charles had tended together for years. The red roses were her favorite, reminding her of the late Queen's love for vibrant colors. As she bent to smell their sweet fragrance, memories flooded back of quiet conversations with Her Majesty about gardening, family, and the burden of public duty. The estate felt eerily quiet this morning. Usually the staff would be bustling about, preparing for the day ahead. But today something felt different. Camilla noticed the gardener wasn't at his usual post, and the housekeeper hadn't brought her morning correspondence as she always did at precisely 8 o'clock. A strange uneasiness settled in her stomach as she made her way back toward the house. Through the kitchen window she could see Mrs. Henderson, their longtime cook, speaking urgently into her phone. The woman's face was pale, and she kept glancing toward the front drive with worried eyes. Camilla quickened her pace, her silk slippers making soft sounds on the stone pathway. As she rounded the corner of the house, her breath caught in her throat. 3 black vehicles with official license plates were parked in her circular driveway. Men in dark suits stood beside them, their faces serious and professional. Her heart began to race as she recognized the insignia on their vehicles. These weren't ordinary police officers or security personnel. These were members of the Royal Guard, the elite unit responsible for protecting the monarchy's most precious assets and secrets. Charles appeared at the front door, still in his morning robe, his hair disheveled from sleep. His face was a mixture of confusion and growing alarm as he spoke with a tall man in a crisp uniform. Camilla could see her husband's hands gesturing, his voice rising slightly in what appeared to be protest. She approached cautiously, trying to catch fragments of their conversation. Words like warrant, investigation, and immediate access drifted toward her on the morning breeze. The official documents in the guard's hand seemed to flutter like warning flags in the gentle wind. The lead officer noticed Camilla approaching and straightened his posture. His voice was respectful but firm as he explained their presence. There had been irregularities discovered in the Queen's estate inventory. Certain valuable items, particularly pieces from her personal jewelry collection, could not be accounted for in the official records. Camilla felt the blood drain from her face. The jewelry collection was legendary, containing pieces that had belonged to queens and princesses for centuries. Some items were worth millions, not just for their monetary value but for their historical significance to the British Crown. The officer continued explaining that their investigation had led them to believe some pieces might have been distributed as personal gifts before the Queen's death, or possibly moved for safekeeping to various royal residences. Camilla's estate was one of several locations they needed to search as part of their thorough investigation. Charles stepped protectively beside his wife, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. He assured the officers of their complete cooperation, while also expressing his bewilderment at the situation. Neither he nor Camilla had any knowledge of missing jewelry, and they couldn't imagine why their home would be connected to such a serious matter. As the officers began organizing their search teams, Camilla's mind raced through recent memories. Had the Queen mentioned anything about her jewelry during their last conversations? Had she given any gifts that might not have been properly recorded? The uncertainty was almost unbearable. The peaceful morning had transformed into something from a nightmare. Neighbors would soon be peering from their windows, wondering why the Royal Guard was at the Parker Bowles estate. The press would inevitably get wind of the situation, and headlines would scream accusations before anyone knew the truth. Camilla gripped Charles's hand tightly as they watched the officers prepare to enter their home. Whatever they were about to discover would change everything. The only question was whether the truth would clear their names or destroy their reputation forever. The search began immediately after the officers finished explaining their procedures. Camilla and Charles were asked to remain in the sitting room, while teams of investigators moved through their home with methodical precision. The sound of footsteps echoed from room to room, accompanied by the occasional opening and closing of drawers and cabinets. Camilla sat rigidly on her favorite armchair, the one positioned perfectly to catch the morning sunlight. But today, No amount of warmth could chase away the chill that had settled deep in her bones. She watched through the window as additional vehicles arrived, bringing more personnel and specialized equipment for detecting hidden compartments or safes. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway with a tray of tea, her hands shaking so badly that the cups rattled against their saucers. She had worked for the family for 15 years and had never seen anything like this. Her loyalty was unwavering, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable as she served the tea with unusual clumsiness. Charles paced back and forth across the Persian rug, his phone buzzing constantly with calls from royal advisors, legal representatives, and family members who had somehow already heard about the situation. Each conversation was tense and whispered, adding to the atmosphere of crisis that had descended upon their normally peaceful home. From upstairs came the sound of furniture being moved, and what sounded like wall panels being tapped. The investigators were being thorough, checking every possible hiding place where valuable items might be concealed. Camilla found herself mentally cataloging the contents of each room, trying to remember if there was anything that might be misconstrued as stolen royal property. The lead officer, Inspector Morrison, returned to speak with them after the first hour of searching. His expression was neutral, professional, but Camilla caught something in his eyes that made her stomach tighten with dread. He sat across from them, his notepad open, and began asking detailed questions about their relationship with the late Queen. Had they visited her private apartments recently? Had she given them any gifts in the months before her death? Did they have access to her personal safe or jewelry boxes? Each question felt like an accusation, despite Morrison's polite tone. Camilla answered honestly, describing the warm friendship she had developed with Her Majesty over the years. She spoke about their shared interests in horse racing and gardening, their quiet conversations about family pressures and public expectations. The Queen had been surprisingly maternal toward her, especially after Camilla's marriage to Charles became officially recognized. There had been small gifts over the years, a silk scarf for Christmas, a rare book about roses for her birthday, but nothing of significant value. Charles corroborated his wife's account, adding details about formal visits and state occasions where they had interacted with the Queen. He emphasized that any gifts or personal items they had received were always properly documented through the appropriate royal channels. The suggestion that they might have improperly acquired royal property was both hurtful and bewildering. Meanwhile, the search continued in earnest. Teams worked their way through the master bedroom, examining Camilla's jewelry box with particular attention. Every piece was photographed and documented, compared against databases of known royal items. Her pearl necklaces, inherited brooches, and anniversary gifts from Charles were all scrutinized under powerful magnifying glasses. The investigation extended to Charles's study, where his collection of rare books and historical documents was carefully examined. His desk drawers were opened, their contents spread across tables for thorough review. Even his private correspondence was subject to inspection, though the officers assured him that personal letters unrelated to their investigation would remain confidential. As the afternoon wore on, neighbors began gathering at respectful distances, their curiosity evident despite their attempts at discretion. Mrs. Pemberton from the house across the lane was pretending to walk her dog for the third time, while the elderly gentleman from the manor house kept finding reasons to check his mailbox. Camilla knew that by evening, the entire village would be buzzing with speculation. The story would spread from house to house, growing more dramatic with each telling. By tomorrow, the newspapers would be full of theories and accusations regardless of what the investigation actually revealed. The emotional toll was becoming unbearable. Every sound from the search teams made Camilla flinch. Every whispered conversation between officers made her wonder what they had found. The violation of privacy was one thing, but the implication that she and Charles might be criminals was devastating. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their disrupted home, Inspector Morrison approached them once again. This time his expression had changed. There was something in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or confusion. He sat down heavily and opened his notebook to a page covered with detailed notes. The search was far from over, but preliminary findings had raised new questions. They had indeed found something, he explained carefully, something that would require additional investigation and possibly change the entire direction of their inquiry. But what they had discovered wasn't what anyone had expected to find. Inspector Morrison's revelation hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Behind a false panel in the guest bedroom, hidden so cleverly that even Camilla and Charles had never suspected its existence, the search team had discovered a small collection of items that defied explanation. But these weren't stolen royal jewels as everyone had feared. The hidden compartment contained old letters tied with faded ribbon, several vintage photograph albums, and a leather jewelry box that looked decades old. The most intriguing discovery was a handwritten letter bearing the late Queen's personal seal, addressed to Camilla but never delivered. The envelope was dated just 2 weeks before Her Majesty's death. Camilla stared at the letter with trembling hands, her mind racing with questions. How had it gotten into her house without her knowledge? Why was it hidden behind a panel she didn't even know existed? The paper felt authentic, the Queen's distinctive handwriting unmistakable, but the circumstances made no sense whatsoever. Charles moved closer to his wife, reading over her shoulder as she carefully opened the sealed envelope. The letter was brief but deeply personal. The Queen wrote about her gratitude for Camilla's friendship during difficult times, her admiration for how Camilla had handled the pressures of royal life, and her hope that certain family treasures would remain where they belonged. The letter mentioned specific jewelry pieces by name: the Cambridge emerald necklace, Queen Victoria's diamond brooch, and the sapphire earrings that had belonged to the Queen Mother. These were exactly the items that had gone missing from the official inventory, the very pieces that had triggered this investigation. But the letter didn't explain where they were or why they were missing. Inspector Morrison studied the letter carefully, comparing the handwriting to verified samples from the Queen's correspondence. His forensics expert examined the paper and ink under portable equipment, confirming that everything appeared authentic. But this only deepened the mystery rather than solving it. The photograph albums contained images spanning decades, showing the Queen at various private family gatherings. Many photos featured people Camilla didn't recognize, intimate moments that seemed far removed from official royal documentation. There were pictures of the Queen as a young mother, laughing with children in garden settings, and images of quiet family dinners in what appeared to be private residences. Among the photographs, Camilla noticed several that made her heart skip. Images of the Queen wearing the very jewelry pieces that were now missing. In one photo, she wore the Cambridge emerald necklace while playing with a young dog on a country estate. Another showed her in the sapphire earrings during what appeared to be an informal family celebration. The leather jewelry box was perhaps the most puzzling discovery of all. It was clearly expensive, made of fine materials, but it was completely empty. Inside the lid was an engraved inscription: "For safekeeping until the time is right, ER." The initials matched the Queen's signature, and the engraving style was consistent with royal jewelry boxes from the same period. Charles examined the false panel where everything had been hidden. The construction was professional, designed to be invisible to casual observation but accessible to someone who knew exactly where to look. The wood matched the rest of the room perfectly, and the mechanism was so smooth that it couldn't have been recently installed. Mrs. Henderson was called in to answer questions about the guest bedroom. She admitted with visible embarrassment that she rarely cleaned behind that particular section of wall paneling. The area was difficult to reach and wasn't part of her regular routine. She had no idea when the compartment might have been created or who could have accessed it. The investigation team began examining the house's history more carefully. Previous owners, contractors who had worked on renovations, anyone who might have had the opportunity to install such a sophisticated hiding place. The records showed that the estate had undergone major renovations 12 years ago, long before Camilla and Charles had purchased the property. As evening approached, the mood in the house had shifted from fear to bewilderment. The discovery of the hidden compartment and its contents had transformed the investigation from a simple case of missing jewelry to something far more complex and mysterious. The letter from the Queen suggested she knew about the missing pieces, but it raised more questions than it answered. Inspector Morrison made several phone calls to royal security officials, describing the unusual findings and requesting guidance on how to proceed. The investigation was no longer just about theft or misplaced inventory. It had become a puzzle involving the Queen's final wishes and secrets that she had apparently intended to reveal. Camilla sat quietly, holding the Queen's letter, and trying to make sense of everything. The hidden compartment was in her house, but she had no knowledge of it. The letter was addressed to her, but she had never received it. The missing jewelry was mentioned in the Queen's own handwriting, but there was no indication of where it actually was. The photographs suggested a side of the Queen's life that had been carefully kept private, relationships and moments that existed outside the public record. The empty jewelry box with its cryptic inscription implied that someone was supposed to know what to do when the time was right. As darkness settled over the estate, it became clear that this investigation was far from over. The discovery had created more mysteries than it had solved, and the truth about the missing royal jewelry remained as elusive as ever. But one thing was certain. The Queen had planned something, and Camilla was somehow central to her final secret intentions. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to the estate. Lady Margaret Thornberry, the Queen's former private secretary, arrived unannounced in a small, modest car rather than the official vehicles everyone had grown accustomed to seeing. Her face was drawn with worry, and she clutched a worn leather briefcase as if it contained the most precious secrets in the world. Camilla met her at the front door, surprised to see the usually composed woman looking so distressed. Lady Margaret had served the Queen for over 30 years, managing her most confidential correspondence and personal affairs. If anyone understood the mystery surrounding the hidden compartment and missing jewelry, it would be her. Inside the sitting room, with Inspector Morrison present as a witness, Lady Margaret opened her briefcase with shaking hands. She removed several documents, including what appeared to be the Queen's private will, not the official document that had been read to the family, but a personal letter of wishes that she had kept sealed until after the funeral. The private will was written entirely in the Queen's handwriting, dated just 1 month before her death. It outlined her desire to ensure that certain precious family items would be preserved for future generations, away from the formal constraints of royal protocol. She had been concerned about political changes that might affect the monarchy and wanted to protect the most meaningful pieces of the family's heritage. According to Lady Margaret's careful explanation, the Queen had selected Camilla as the guardian of these treasures because of her proven discretion and deep understanding of royal responsibilities. The hidden compartment had been prepared years earlier, during renovations that the Queen had secretly commissioned, while the previous owners were traveling abroad. The plan had been for Lady Margaret to personally deliver the Queen's sealed letter to Camilla after the funeral, along with detailed instructions about the location and contents of the hidden compartment. But the Queen's sudden decline and death had happened faster than anyone expected, leaving Lady Margaret struggling with grief and uncertainty about whether to proceed with such an unusual arrangement. She had delayed the delivery, hoping to consult with other royal advisors, but the news of the missing jewelry inventory and the subsequent investigation had forced her hand. The items weren't stolen or misplaced. They were exactly where the Queen had intended them to be, waiting for Camilla to discover them and understand their significance. Inspector Morrison listened to this explanation with growing amazement. The missing Cambridge emerald necklace, Queen Victoria's diamond brooch, and the Queen Mother's sapphire earrings were all items that held tremendous sentimental value for the Queen. They represented connections to the women who had shaped the monarchy before her, pieces she wanted preserved outside the formal royal collection. Lady Margaret produced a detailed map, showing the exact location of 3 other hidden compartments throughout the estate. The Queen had been remarkably thorough in her planning, creating a private treasury that would remain safe from political upheavals, public scandals, or family disputes that might threaten the royal heritage. The search teams immediately began examining the locations marked on the map. Behind a bookshelf in Charles's study, they found the Cambridge emerald necklace wrapped in silk and stored in a custom-fitted box. The emeralds caught the light like captured fragments of ocean, their beauty taking everyone's breath away even in the subdued atmosphere of the investigation. Queen Victoria's diamond brooch was discovered beneath a loose floorboard in the morning room, protected by layers of acid-free paper and moisture-absorbing crystals. The diamonds sparkled with an inner fire that seemed to hold the history of the British Empire, each facet reflecting stories of triumph and sorrow from bygone eras. The sapphire earrings were found in the most ingenious hiding place of all, inside a hollowed-out book in the library that appeared completely ordinary from the outside. The Queen Mother's favorite pieces seemed to emanate a warm blue light, as if they still carried the warmth and grace of their beloved former owner. Each discovery was documented with photographs and witness statements, but the atmosphere had completely changed from the previous day's tense investigation. These weren't stolen goods or evidence of criminal activity. They were gifts from a dying monarch to someone she trusted with the preservation of royal history. Camilla held each piece with reverence and growing emotion. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. These weren't just valuable jewelry items. They were tangible links to centuries of royal tradition, symbols of duty and sacrifice that had been passed down through generations of remarkable women. Lady Margaret explained that the Queen had left additional instructions about the care and eventual disposition of these pieces. Camilla was to hold them in trust, ensuring their preservation while having the discretion to return them to the official royal collection if circumstances warranted. The decision was entirely hers to make, based on her judgment about what would best serve the monarchy's future. The photographs found in the hidden compartment now made perfect sense. They showed the Queen wearing these pieces during private family moments, times when they represented personal joy rather than official duty. She had wanted Camilla to understand not just their monetary value, but their emotional significance to the royal family. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the recovered treasures, Camilla felt a profound connection to the Queen's memory. The elaborate plan, the hidden compartments, the careful documentation, all of it demonstrated a level of trust and affection that she had never fully realized existed. The investigation was drawing to a close, but a new chapter was beginning. Camilla now understood that she had been chosen for a role she never expected, guardian of the royal family's most precious private treasures. The Queen's final gift wasn't just the jewelry itself, but the trust and responsibility that came with protecting them. Inspector Morrison began preparing his final report, documenting the unusual but completely legal circumstances surrounding the missing jewelry. The mystery was solved, but the emotional impact of the discovery would resonate for years to come. The weight of the Queen's trust settled over Camilla like a warm but heavy mantle as the investigation teams began packing their equipment. What had started as a terrifying accusation had transformed into the most profound honor she could imagine. But with the immediate crisis resolved, new challenges were already emerging on the horizon. Charles stood beside the window, watching the last of the official vehicles disappear down their tree-lined drive. His relief was palpable, but Camilla could see the concern in his eyes as he contemplated the implications of what they had discovered. The royal family would need to be informed, decisions would need to be made, and the press would inevitably learn about the unusual circumstances. Lady Margaret remained at the estate to help Camilla understand the full scope of her new responsibilities. The leather briefcase contained detailed documentation about each piece of jewelry, their histories, their significance to previous royal generations, and the Queen's specific wishes for their care. The responsibility was both an honor and a burden that would require careful consideration. The Cambridge emerald necklace had belonged to Queen Mary, passed down through generations of royal women who had worn it during some of the most significant moments in British history. The Queen had worn it to her own coronation rehearsal and during private celebrations with her family. Its value was immeasurable, not just monetarily but as a symbol of continuity and tradition. Queen Victoria's diamond brooch carried even greater historical weight. It had been a gift from Prince Albert and had rarely been seen in public during the 20th century. The Queen had treasured it as a connection to her great-great-grandmother's love story, wearing it only during the most intimate family gatherings. The responsibility of caring for such a significant piece of royal heritage was almost overwhelming. The Queen Mother's sapphire earrings represented a more recent but equally precious connection to royal history. They had been worn during some of the most challenging periods of the monarchy, including during World War II when the Queen Mother's courage and determination had inspired the British people. The Queen had inherited them along with her mother's strength and dignity. As evening approached, Camilla found herself alone in her sitting room with the 3 precious pieces spread before her on a silk cloth. Each item seemed to pulse with its own energy, carrying the memories and emotions of the remarkable women who had worn them. The responsibility felt almost sacred, like being entrusted with pieces of the royal family's soul. The practical aspects of guardianship were complex and demanding. The jewelry required special storage conditions, regular professional cleaning, and sophisticated security measures to ensure their preservation. Insurance alone would be a significant consideration, and the legal implications of holding such valuable royal property needed careful review by expert solicitors. But beyond the practical concerns lay deeper questions about the Queen's motivations and expectations. Why had she chosen Camilla for this role rather than other family members? What had she foreseen that made her believe these pieces needed protection outside the formal royal system? The trust implied was both humbling and slightly frightening. Lady Margaret provided some insight into the Queen's thinking during their final months together. Her Majesty had been increasingly concerned about political changes that might affect the monarchy's future. She worried about the possibility that future governments might seek to limit royal privileges or that family disputes might threaten the preservation of precious heirlooms. The Queen had also expressed concern about the increasing public scrutiny of royal possessions and the growing demands for transparency in royal finances. She feared that pieces with deep personal significance might be sold or dispersed to museums if they remained in the official collection. By placing them in Camilla's care, she ensured they would remain connected to the living royal family. Charles joined the conversation as they discussed the delicate matter of informing other family members about the arrangement. The discovery would need to be handled with sensitivity, as some relatives might question why they hadn't been chosen as guardians. The Queen's decision would need to be respected, but family relationships would require careful management. The media implications were equally challenging to consider. News of the hidden treasure and the investigation would inevitably leak to the press. The story would be sensationalized, with headlines focusing on the drama rather than the touching tribute to royal tradition that the Queen had actually created. Protecting the dignity of her memory while managing public curiosity would require skilled public relations management. As the first day of her guardianship drew to a close, Camilla felt the full emotional weight of what had transpired. The terror of the morning's investigation had given way to profound gratitude and respect for the Queen's final demonstration of trust and affection. But the responsibility ahead felt monumental. She carefully wrapped each piece in its protective silk covering, storing them temporarily in the estate's existing safe, while more secure arrangements could be made. The Cambridge emerald seemed to wink at her in the lamplight, as if approving of their new guardian. Queen Victoria's diamonds maintained their regal sparkle, and the Queen Mother's sapphires radiated the warm blue of a summer sky. That night, Camilla lay awake thinking about the extraordinary day and the even more extraordinary trust that had been placed in her hands. The Queen's final gift was more than precious jewelry. It was a testament to their friendship, a recognition of Camilla's place in the royal family, and a responsibility that would shape the rest of her life. The hidden compartments had revealed more than treasure. They had revealed the depth of the Queen's planning, her concern for the future, and her confidence in Camilla's character. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the reality of guardianship began. But tonight was for gratitude and quiet reflection on a friendship that had transcended death to create this remarkable legacy. 3 weeks after the discovery, Camilla sat in her private study surrounded by historical documents, insurance appraisals, and security consultations. The simple life she had known before was now complicated by the responsibility of caring for priceless royal treasures. Every decision required careful thought, from the temperature settings in her safe to the selection of trusted security personnel. The media attention had been intense, but manageable, thanks largely to the royal family's unified response to the situation. Rather than treating the discovery as a scandal, they had embraced it as a touching example of the late Queen's thoughtfulness and planning. The official statement praised Camilla's discretion and emphasized the historical significance of preserving important royal heirlooms. However, not everyone in the extended royal circle had been pleased with the arrangement. Camilla had received several pointed phone calls from distant relatives who questioned why they hadn't been consulted about the Queen's decision. Some suggested that such valuable pieces belonged in museums where the public could appreciate them, while others argued that they should remain in the official royal collection. Lady Margaret had been invaluable during these challenging weeks, helping Camilla understand the historical protocols surrounding royal jewelry and the precedents for private guardianship of crown property. The arrangement wasn't unprecedented. but it was unusual enough to require careful navigation of both legal and family sensitivities. The most surprising development had been the discovery of additional letters from the Queen, found among her private papers after royal archivists began their systematic review of her personal correspondence. These letters revealed that Camilla's selection as guardian had been planned for over 2 years, with the Queen observing her character and discretion during various royal functions and private interactions. One particularly moving letter, written to the Queen's private solicitor, described Camilla's transformation from a reluctant royal newcomer to a trusted member of the family. The Queen had been impressed by Camilla's genuine care for Charles during difficult periods, her respect for royal traditions, and her ability to handle public scrutiny with grace and dignity. The practical aspects of guardianship had proven more complex than anyone initially realized. Each piece required different care protocols based on its age, materials, and construction. The Cambridge emerald necklace needed regular professional cleaning to maintain its brilliance, while Queen Victoria's diamond brooch required careful handling due to its delicate 19th century setting. Insurance had been particularly challenging to arrange. Standard household policies couldn't begin to cover items of such value and historical significance. Specialized insurers who dealt with royal and museum collections had to be consulted, requiring detailed documentation, professional appraisals, and sophisticated security measures that transformed Camilla's estate into something resembling a small fortress. The emotional weight of guardianship had also been more intense than expected. Camilla found herself thinking about the Queen daily, wondering if she was making the right decisions about care and preservation. Sometimes she would take out one of the pieces and hold it carefully, trying to feel the connection to the remarkable women who had worn it before her. Charles had been wonderfully supportive, understanding that his wife's new role required significant time and attention. He had helped research the historical significance of each piece, finding old photographs and documents that showed previous queens wearing the jewelry during important state occasions and family celebrations. The Queen Mother's sapphire earrings had become Camilla's particular favorites, perhaps because they seemed to embody the warmth and strength she remembered from her meetings with that remarkable woman. Sometimes, in the privacy of her dressing room, she would try them on and imagine the conversations they might have witnessed, the moments of joy and sorrow they had shared with their previous owners. Local security had been upgraded significantly, with discreet but effective measures to protect both the treasures and the family's privacy. The changes had been implemented gradually to avoid drawing attention, but neighbors had begun to notice additional security personnel and improved lighting around the estate perimeter. The village had initially been abuzz with rumors and speculation about the dramatic morning when the royal guard had arrived, but the official explanation had satisfied most curiosity. Camilla had become something of a local celebrity, with residents taking quiet pride in knowing that their neighbor had been personally chosen by the Queen for such an important responsibility. Professional conservators had visited the estate to assess the condition of each piece and provide recommendations for their continued preservation. Their reports had been encouraging, confirming that the Queen's careful storage methods had maintained the jewelry in excellent condition. The hidden compartments had actually provided ideal preservation conditions, protecting the pieces from light, moisture, and temperature fluctuations. As Camilla prepared for her first major royal function since becoming guardian of the treasures, she faced a decision that embodied all the complexities of her new role. The family was gathering for a private memorial service marking 100 days since the Queen's death. The question was whether to wear one of the entrusted pieces as a tribute to Her Majesty's memory. The decision required balancing respect for tradition, family sensitivities, and the Queen's original intentions for the jewelry. Lady Margaret had provided guidance based on historical precedent, but ultimately the choice would reflect Camilla's understanding of her role and her interpretation of the Queen's wishes. Standing before her mirror, holding the Queen Mother's sapphire earrings, Camilla felt the weight of history and the warmth of the Queen's continuing trust. The decision she made would set a precedent for how she would fulfill her guardianship role and honor the remarkable legacy that had been placed in her care. The private memorial service was held in the same chapel where Camilla had married Charles years earlier, a place filled with memories of joy and commitment that seemed perfect for honoring the Queen's legacy. After much consideration and consultation with Lady Margaret, Camilla had decided to wear the Queen Mother's sapphire earrings, feeling that their warmth and elegance would provide the most appropriate tribute. As she entered the chapel, the soft blue sparkle of the sapphires caught the candlelight, creating an almost ethereal glow that seemed to embody the Queen Mother's gentle spirit. Other family members noticed immediately, and the subtle nods of approval told Camilla that she had made the right choice. The earrings weren't just beautiful accessories, they were a visible connection to the royal heritage that the Queen had entrusted to her care. During the service, as prayers were offered and memories shared, Camilla felt a profound sense of peace about her role as guardian. The Queen's careful planning had created something beautiful from what could have been a crisis. Instead of family discord or public scandal, her final wishes had strengthened bonds and created a new tradition of private stewardship alongside public duty. After the service, Princess Anne approached Camilla with tears in her eyes, expressing her gratitude for the loving care with which the family treasures were being preserved. She shared a memory of seeing her mother wear those very earrings during a quiet family dinner, describing how the Queen had touched them gently and spoken about the continuity they represented across generations. The weeks following the memorial service brought a settling into new routines. Camilla had established regular consultations with conservation experts, security reviews with trusted professionals, and careful documentation procedures that would ensure the treasure's provenance and condition were properly maintained for future generations. She had also begun working on a private memoir about her friendship with the Queen, focusing particularly on their shared conversations about duty, family, and the weight of public responsibility. The memoir would never be published during her lifetime, but it would provide future guardians with insight into the Queen's intentions and the emotional significance of each entrusted piece. The Cambridge Emerald necklace had been photographed extensively for insurance and historical records, revealing details about its construction that hadn't been properly documented in decades. The examination had uncovered a tiny inscription inside the main clasp, a personal message from King George V to Queen Mary that added another layer of romantic history to the already precious piece. Queen Victoria's diamond brooch had been the subject of scholarly interest from royal historians, who were thrilled to have access to a piece they had only seen in old photographs. Their research had revealed fascinating details about its creation and the occasions when it had been worn during some of the most significant moments in British history. The practical aspects of guardianship had evolved into a comfortable routine. Monthly security reviews ensured that protection measures remained effective without being intrusive. Quarterly conservation assessments monitored the condition of each piece. Annual insurance evaluations kept coverage appropriate for the treasure's increasing historical value. But perhaps most importantly, Camilla had developed a personal relationship with each piece that went beyond their monetary worth. She understood now why the Queen had chosen her, not just for her discretion or her position in the family, but for her ability to appreciate the emotional and historical significance that made these items truly priceless. The hidden compartment discovery had also led to an unexpected hobby. Camilla had become fascinated with the history of royal jewelry, researching the stories behind other famous pieces and their connections to the women who had worn them. Her studies had deepened her appreciation for the weight of tradition that each generation of royal women had carried. Lady Margaret had become a regular visitor, sharing stories about the Queen's private thoughts and observations during her final months. These conversations had revealed the depth of planning that had gone into selecting Camilla as guardian, including careful consideration of her character, her relationship with Charles, and her demonstrated respect for royal traditions. As the first anniversary of the Queen's death approached, Camilla reflected on how completely her life had changed since that morning when the royal guard had arrived at her estate. What had begun as a terrifying accusation had evolved into one of the most meaningful responsibilities of her life. The treasures remained safely preserved, their beauty undiminished by time or the drama of their discovery. More importantly, they served as daily reminders of the Queen's trust, the continuity of royal tradition, and the profound responsibility that comes with preserving history for future generations. Standing in her sitting room as evening light filtered through the windows, Camilla opened the leather jewelry box that had once been empty, but now held the Queen Mother's sapphire earrings. The inscription inside the lid, for safekeeping until the time is right, had taken on new meaning. The time had been right not just for discovery, but for understanding the depth of trust and affection that the Queen's final gift represented. The crisis had become a blessing. The investigation had revealed a treasure beyond price, and the fear had transformed into the deepest gratitude. Camilla had discovered that being chosen as guardian of the Queen's most precious personal treasures was more than an honor. It was a continuation of friendship that would last for the rest of her life and beyond.